Hujambo Espresso Talk Today community. It's Robin here. Asante Sana, thank you so much for joining us today for this most uncommon conversation. Today, the Espresso Talk Today team is meeting with Dr. Ebony Butler to discuss her amazing and incredibly helpful creation that she calls My Therapy Cards. The full name is My Therapy Cards, a guide for self-discovery and insight. We have a picture of the cards in the gallery section of the Espresso Talk Today website, so please go take a look there if you want to see these cards. They're real. You might be thinking, what? What are therapy cards? Are they real therapy for people with emotional difficulties? Can I use them in place of a licensed therapist? Do they actually work? How do they work? These are all great questions. The ETT team had the same questions. So that's why we contacted Dr. Ebony, and we're so grateful that she was gracious enough to spend considerable time addressing and answering these questions for us and for you. Dr. Ebony brings a wide range of knowledge and experience to this conversation about mental health in the Black community. So we're going to tap into that, as much of that knowledge and experience as time permits. Mel's going to arrive in just a minute, then we'll get started. But while we wait for her, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Ebony Butler. Dr. Ebony, as we know her, is a licensed psychologist and food relationship strategist. She is passionate about helping women survivors thrive in trauma recovery. She's specifically trained to work with a variety of clients with issues related to depression, anxiety, and other stress responses. Dr. Ebony also specializes in guiding women to develop skills that increase their effectiveness in interpersonal interactions, including communication and asking for and getting what they want and need. Dr. Therapy is specifically interested in issues that impact marginalized communities, including women of color and LGBTQ persons. Dr. Ebony uses her training and expertise in roles of psychology, food relationship, and mindset strategist. She's also the host of the Food Is Not Bae podcast. It's in its 4th season now, and it's a fantastic podcast show. And she's author of the book, Food Is Not Bae, a guide to ending your toxic relationship with food. We want to talk with her about that too. Finally, about Dr. Ebony's My Therapy Cards. This is an innovative approach to therapy, self-analysis, and self-empowerment. She says that the cards have been designed to guide you through new self-discoveries and insights that will help you to face life's challenges and evolve into your highest, most effective self. And there are different cards, different My Therapy cards for women, men, and young people. You're probably thinking the same thing as I am. Wow. Just wow. Yes, Dr. Ebony is doing extraordinary work in therapy, coaching, and self-empowerment, and she's going to show us today the different ways and the most effective ways to use the My Therapy cards. ETT listeners know that we focus on the importance of Black mental health and self-care. That's why it's so important to address these issues in different ways and from different perspectives and approaches. And we're so glad that you're here with us to learn from such an experienced, knowledgeable, and committed professional like Dr. Ebony Butler. If you're part of the Black community in the United States or abroad, I know that you'll recognize the experiences and stresses that Dr. Ebony will discuss, and you might be surprised and especially interested to learn about this way of identifying and addressing racial stress, anxiety, depression, and trauma. people of other races will learn about the real stress and trauma of living in an anti-Black environment, and perhaps even learn ways that they can be effective allies to Black friends and family members. I admit, though, these can be difficult, even traumatic issues for some. So please, remember to breathe. Let's take a deep breath together. In through your nose, and then out through your mouth. We have a great and uncommon conversation for you today. Spoiler alert, we're going to randomly select a therapy card and walk through the process with Dr. Ebony. You definitely do not want to miss that. Okay, I'm going to stop here. You can hear it all for yourself directly from Dr. Ebony herself. Mel has just arrived, so sit back, relax, grab an espresso, remember to breathe, and let's get started. Hey, Mel.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you today?
I'm doing absolutely great.
You always are. And as you can see, I'm doing well too. And as you can see, I'm having an espresso with a special guest, Dr. Ebony Butler. Do you
That's
remember she was
wonderful.
the creator of the My Therapy cards?
I know about those cards, and I'm very excited that I'm here when she's here. Welcome, Dr. Butler. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, when we saw these cards, we're very excited about them, and we said we have a few questions, and we know that this is going to be a really interesting discussion because these are such a wonderful tool for people. And the Espresso Talk Today team has really been working hard, very hard, to find ways to support our mental health. And for us, this means to identify when our mental health is being negatively affected, then finding ways to support and improve our mental and emotional health and well-being. And we know this isn't easy. And we've presented this issue to several other psychologists who've discussed the effects of stress and trauma, how race and culture have been pathologized, the unrecognized health effects of racial stress and trauma, and they've given us some steps that we as individuals and as a community can take to support our mental health. Full disclosure, Dr. Ebony, we have focused really on Black mental health for Black folks. Of course, everyone should have good mental health, but we do feel the Black community has some special issues that are not always being addressed. And we do want to encourage Black people to consider therapy, all different kinds of therapy. Personally, I am a very firm believer in therapy, and not just when there's a specific problem at hand. And I believe that therapy can be helpful at any time. I think it's been helpful for me so I can live my best life, working towards that, and to work towards being my best self. So I was very interested when I learned about my therapy cards that you created. And this brings me to why I'm so happy that we are here to discuss this with you, Dr. Ebony, that Mel has been able to join me too, and to discuss these cards and how to use them. So welcome to our uncommon conversation. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. And I'm here for all Black things, all things Black mental health especially. So thank you.
That's wonderful to hear. And I have to say, my therapist, even though I'm really interested in this cards, my therapist is fantastic. I really like her. I feel that she really gets me, and we've had a lot of breakthroughs together. And I read on your website that you said therapy is a collaborative process. So with that in mind, my first question, and we're going to get to a lot of other issues, but my first question is, are the My Therapy cards designed to replace my therapist?
No. No, it's a resource, it's a bridge. So if we want to think about it, we don't ever want to get rid of our therapists, ever. But we want those people who are struggling to get into, especially, are we talking about Black people? Like, I want to specifically focus there. Okay. We know that there's a huge stigma. And so for people who are apprehensive about getting therapy, about finding a therapist, then the cards will give them some insight into what it could be like to actually engage in therapy. So we think about it as a bridge that way. We think about it as something that will allow people to kind of get a sense of what issues do I need to kind of bring up? A lot of people come to me and they're like, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what my issues are. And so the cards can help you uncover that, help you gain some insights like, oh, I didn't really realize I had an issue with forgiveness. So I didn't really realize that I was still doing things that no longer served me, or I knew I was doing and I'm ready to stop. Or I didn't really realize I had so many hangups in my mind about a particular thing, about prioritizing myself or taking care of myself. And so this gives people some language, because language is a huge thing, like a huge barrier when you're going to therapy. It's like a lot of people are intimidated. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to ask. And I just don't want to talk to anybody. So the cards can help them find the language, feel more confident, and actually begin to get a feel of what it's like to actually engage in therapy, which I think is important as a psychologist, to actually put questions that I ask in real life in the cards, so people can really get a sense of what it may be like for a therapist to ask you that question. And on the other side, therapists can use these cards as well to help clients kind of move along in session where they may be feeling stuck, or they can use them as in between session assignments so that clients can start doing work outside of the session.
I see. So it's for the people who are maybe seeking therapy, but it's also for licensed therapists as well. To help guide them, and coaches and others too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, maybe even ministers. A lot of us go to our ministers, for.
Yeah. So we can look at it in all kinds of ways. It's their conversation starters. They're meant to dig deeper than affirmations. They're meant to dig deeper than regular "how are you doing" questions. And so sometimes, even as licensed professionals, we struggle with language. So I thought that it would be helpful to give us also language that we can use if we get stuck in session, if coaches get stuck. So a lot of coaches have gotten the cards to use in their sessions. I know there's another person who does a show. They use one every week on their show on YouTube. So it's a way that they build community. It's a way to check in with people. It's a way to do meaningful work. And so we can use this resource in so many therapeutic ways that is not meant to replace therapy, but meant to complement, meant to be a bridge, meant to be a resource to start the mental health conversation and to keep it going, actually.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that's really what our community needs. And I'm really surprised to hear that there's still a lot of stigma associated with seeking therapy. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yes. So in order to understand where we are now with the stigma, we got to kind of understand where we came from. And the stigma is not just here haphazardly, like it's here because the field of mental health has not done a great job of looking at Black folks, people of color, as citizens. The field actually started out when we talk about talk therapy, because we know prior to that it was all medication management and putting people away in asylums, that kind of thing. But we talk about talk therapy, the whole thing started around just decriminalization. How do we make Black folks less criminal? How do we make Black folks more upright citizens in society? And so if this is how the mental health field started around, especially talk therapy, then imagine that message that was sent to our grandparents, our great grandparents, our ancestors, and how that was passed down. And so if this field looks at us as criminals, we're probably going to tell our folks that we love not to go. We probably are going to kind of send the message that this is not somebody you want to talk to, because this is what they do to you if you talk to them. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, we think about when talk therapy started. So there's the Harlem Project, which actually started to not to help juveniles not be funneled into the prison system. So this really wasn't about helping us gain strength. It really was about how do we keep you out of jail, because this is how we were viewed, right? And so when we think about when that was back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, that kind of thing, think about access to services that Black folks had. We did not. And so if there was no access, if there was still huge segregation, then what access did we have? What opportunities did we have to go sit in front of somebody, especially somebody who looked like us, to be able to talk about these things? So the field has not been a great place to enter or engage in because of access issues and sort of what would happen once I went. So fear around consequences, that kind of thing. So this stigma is long perpetuated. And so now I even just saw last week, and it actually really broke my heart, but it was a meme that was supposed to be funny, but somebody mentioned This is why I don't go to therapy, is because if I go and I tell them all that's going on with me, they're going to hospitalize me. Mm-hmm. And this is still very much why therapy has a stigma, because we still have people who are incompetent. We have, and they're licensed, but then that's my soapbox, because everybody who's licensed is not competent, because that licensing exam doesn't necessarily gauge competence. It gauges what you can remember, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and some of that stuff we never even use. But if you have professionals who are not culturally competent meeting a Black person who says that they are afraid if they walk out of their house that they're going to get shot, or who feels like, I would rather end my own life before somebody ends my life. If you're not competent enough to have these conversations, and the first thing you run to is hospitalization, then you're going to turn a lot of people away, and you're actually repeating how this field actually started. So a large part of the issue is that we don't have competent providers to deal with unique issues that Black and brown bodies experience. And the first sort of method of intervention is hospitalization. And that is a very, very, very quick way to get somebody not to trust you and not to come back. So we need to be having conversations around how these thoughts come about. What are they rooted in? Are they real? I remember when Breonna Taylor was murdered, and I had some women telling me, I'm afraid to go outside. I'm afraid to go to sleep in my own house. And that is real. But traditional psychology would tell you to refute that as an irrational thought. That's not an irrational thought for us. That's a very real thought for us. But if you don't have the cultural competence, the cultural awareness, the race awareness, then you're not having these conversations with your clients who are presenting in Black and brown bodies. And this is why people, they go out and they tell people, I'm never going to therapy again. I don't want to go. And that's how message solidifies. And people get the message that they're going to do something crazy to me and I don't want to go. And so that's why stigma still exists.
Yeah, but since that stigma is there, isn't it kind of like among ourselves? Like if I tell my friends, oh, I'm going to a therapist, they think I'm crazy. Why are you going to a therapist? So how do I manage that?
Absolutely. And so outside of the other context that I was mentioning, we have got to understand we've got to do a better job of releasing judgment. And I think a lot of it could be rooted in, one, us not knowing what mental illness is, or us not knowing what emotional distress is. And I think some of that also could be rooted in our understanding a lot of spirituality, that kind of thing around you must not be strong enough to deal with that, or if you prayed long enough, you would not be dealing with that. So some of that judgment is there. And honestly, we are entitled to judge other people. We feel like we can judge other people based on where we think we've elevated to or elevated from. And so as a community, we've got to do better about ostracizing people who are different than us based on what we think is sane or not. And honestly, I think it's internalized hate. I think it's internalized racism. I think we're just spewing out to us what has been told to us about ourselves. And so that to me is happening at a deeper level that people may not be aware of. But just on a surface simplistic answer, I think we've got to release judgment and be more willing to listen to people when they say they're in distress. Like I cannot recall her name, but Miss America, Miss USA, who died by suicide.
Yes, right.
And the things that we say about people who die by suicide, and the fact that we think is not something happening to us, we've got to broaden our minds to understand that these same things affect us, and that people who look like us are dying by suicide, are experiencing depression, are experiencing anxiety. A lot of the things that we tell each other is dismissive, and you're just doing it for attention. No, nothing's wrong with you. Because I think historically that has been protective for us, but it's not serving us now. It's not serving us now.
So if I feel that I don't have any problems, I mean, if I use your cards, would that kind of bring up problems that maybe either I didn't know I had, or it causes problems that I didn't have, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you don't have to have significant problems that's causing disruption or dysfunction in your life. We all have problems, right? We all have issues that we struggle with, not to the point where we have complete dysfunction, we can't go to work and that kind of thing. or we can't engage with our friends and family. But we will have issues that kind of keep us stuck, whether that's a perpetual thought of inferiority, a perpetual thought of guilt, a conditioned response to guilt, shame, embarrassment. So these cards won't bring up things that's not there, but they'll have you think about things and maybe find different perspective about things you thought were not a problem. I'll give you a really good example, Mel. I have a client who said, my friends think that I'm rigid, but I don't think I'm rigid. They keep giving me feedback that I'm coming off rude, but I don't think I'm rude. I don't think it's offensive. So that is a person who may not think they have a problem. Because the narrative is, I don't have a problem. They have a problem. They're too sensitive, right?
Yeah.
So the thing to do is like, get the cards. You will read a card. What is something that, keeps happening over and over again, or something that you keep getting feedback from? This will be in the habit section, right? And this will implore you to actually sit with some things and maybe gain some new perspective. If you still can't gain perspective, then that's fine. If you keep getting this feedback and you keep having broken relationships, at some point, my hope is that you utilize the cards to get the perspective and then begin a relationship with the therapist who can help you learn some new coping skills. But the cards won't plant anything there that's not already there.
That's a very, very interesting concept. It's already there, but maybe it's not in our conscious mind. Maybe it's somewhere buried, or we're getting a feedback from friends and relatives, and we're pushing back on that.
Yeah. You ever heard anybody say, I don't have a problem, but y'all keep telling me that I'm mean? That's just me. And so as humans, we're protective. And so we're going to protect ourselves. And so that defensiveness may be a coping skill. That defensiveness may be protective in that I can't release this, because if I release this, then I'm afraid that I'm going to be too vulnerable to actually kind of survive. And so while this may not be things that people are thinking cognitively, that's why this kind of work is helpful for you to begin to dig at why you're doing this and why this is something you're not willing to change, even though it's getting in the way for you and even though it's causing problems for you in other areas. Why is that not something you're willing to give up?
So that's interesting too, because if you mentioned the cards, I think we should maybe start turning to them, because I have them next to me. I see there are 3 types here: so the mindset cards, habit cards, and trigger cards. And I'd like to ask you, how are these cards used? How do I use these cards?
Yeah, so one thing is the cards were actually created out of a need to kind of reduce stigma, address stigma, cost, access, that kind of thing. And so when we're talking about actually going in to use the cards, you can use the cards, like get the cards, pull one and work through it. But for people who need a little bit more routine, I suggest using 1 card per week and choosing the cards that are less sort of less emotionally disturbing, if I could say that. I don't think they're disturbing, but there's some feedback that I've gotten from people that, oh my God, I read that card and I just had to put it down because it just brought up, like, it made me cry, or I couldn't think about it right then. So what I would say is go through all the cards in one category. Pull out those cards that are easiest to approach, put them in order from easiest, so low level, mid level, high level, as far as ease goes, and then start working on the ones that are low level, because what we want to do is to generate confidence, generate motivation to keep coming back to the cards. So if you work on the low level card, then that will increase your confidence to come back, that you can keep doing the work. And I would say do that for each category, or do that throughout the whole deck. The categories are mindset, habits, and triggers. So the mindset gets at the mental blocks that we have, those things that we're thinking, our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes. The habits gets at the things that we're doing behaviorally. What are those things that we've kind of been conditioned to do and that we have on autopilot? And then triggers gets at our coping skills and emotion regulation. How are we dealing with things when life comes up? What are those emotions that are difficult to sit with? What are my coping skills to deal with that? And so this is my framework for us, like getting back connected to our bodies, understanding what our bodies is telling us, understanding what we're thinking, what we're feeling, because most of us, I don't know I don't think people know. So I'm a psychologist whose work is rooted in trauma work. And so a lot of trauma survivors are disconnected from the body. Most of us live in our heads, or most of us live in our bodies, and we have to find that flow again. Mm-hmm. Well, as Black people, we've all experienced trauma. So there's a potential for all of us to be disconnected and be completely logical. I don't know if you've ever heard somebody say, I live in my head, I'm completely in my head. Yeah, this is our inability to kind of connect. Trauma comes in and disrupts that connection. So these categories are meant to bring us back to an awareness of self, to gain some insight about what we're doing in order to help us kind of get to a place where we're thriving, where we are living lives that are a better quality. And so you can choose either one of those categories, and I recommend working through one per week so that you can have a year's worth of work to do. And you can work on them in any category. So you can use it. I want to work on relationships. My goal for 2022 is relationships. So you can pull a card and think about it in the context of relationship. Next year or next quarter, you can think about your relationship with food. I'm going to think about this card as far as my relationship with food goes. So that answers Mel's question too, around, I don't know if I have a problem, but if you take it by context and say, well, I'm struggling with how I approach food or the role that food has in my life, then I will pull a card. And maybe that same forgiveness card that I use for relationships, what do I need to forgive myself for in relationships? So I shouldn't have said that thing, but I keep beating myself up about it. Same card we can use in the food relationship context. What do I need to forgive myself for? I can forgive myself for constantly thinking that my body has to be perfect in order to be worthy. And so it can dig up different things based on the context by which you're using the card. So if you're working with a therapist and a therapist has a little bit more insight around, okay, let's pull a card to work on this. But if you're working by yourself, you can use it per context based on what it is, the areas of your life you want to address.
Now, for the triggers, you said that trauma would come under triggers. Like if I experienced, say, a racial trauma, maybe somebody was following me around in the store and I felt like very uncomfortable with that. Would that be under the trigger cards?
Trauma spans all of them, actually, because trauma is a response to something. Trauma is a significant event that disrupts the way you approach the world, see the world, experience yourself, and experience others. So we can have a trauma response in our mindset. So my mind tells me everybody is dangerous. That's a thought.
Okay.
So that's a thought. That would be a mental block, right? Everybody is dangerous. Therefore, I don't trust people. Or therefore, I don't trust myself because I couldn't keep myself safe. I'm not worthy enough to prioritize myself or take care of myself. That's a mindset card. In the habit card, the behavior may look like I check my doors 3 times before I go to bed, or I walk around my house 3 times at night before I go to sleep, or I don't let my children go anywhere because I don't trust anybody. So I keep my kids at my house and they're giving me feedback that they're miserable, or they're giving me feedback that they're not socializing in the ways that they need to develop. Another habit thing could be I keep attracting the same type of people from my place of trauma. So that's a habit thing as well. Or I keep answering the phone for my exes when I know I should not be answering the phone for my exes. So that's a habit thing that falls under trauma. The trigger would be I'm jumpy, I'm startled, I sabotage relationships, I cry easily, it's uncontrollable. Another card is when I feel shame in relationships, I blank. So shame is I end the relationship because I know that they're going to end it first. So these are the things that it will get in. So trauma spans all categories because we have mental blocks, habit blocks, trigger blocks that shows up across the trauma spectrum.
That's very interesting because I never thought about trauma being under mindset, because you could have a trauma without actually having a trauma. It was there before and now it's there again.
Oh, trauma lives in the brain.
Yes, it's there. Yeah.
Trauma lives in the brain. Trauma is purely, the trauma response is typically either physiological or in our minds. It's all perception. So when you come to work with me, one of the things that we talk about is we don't need to keep going over what happened to you. We don't need to keep talking about the memory. What we need to talk about is what life now looks like for you since that has happened. And so even for things that didn't directly happen to us, right, Mel? So we witnessed the attack. We witnessed the murder. We witnessed the assault. That is still traumatizing to me and lives in my brain's memory and it lives in my body. So I'm going to continuously have responses to those things, even though it didn't happen directly to me. So my mind then creates a thought, you're not safe. And so it's there, right? And so it didn't have to happen to me for it to be there, but it's happening. And then it can be all around us because we're still experiencing trauma all the time. We're in a pandemic. We're in a crisis. Still, like all these things are continuously happening. So our brain is perceiving all the time how to navigate the world based on this new information that we're getting. And so based on this new information, you actually can't trust people. Based on what you just saw, your body is not safe. And so all these things. Or it can tell us things like you need to say yes to everybody in order to be safe. And so that's where people become people pleasers.
But then you have the three categories. You have habit, mindset, and trigger. So when I'm sitting down to say, okay, now I need to, I have some issues, I need to deal with them. How do I decide which of those categories, or should I go through all of the cards and just pull out the cards that seem to resonate with what I'm feeling?
You can do either of those, to be honest. You can be either of those. You can go through all the cards and then put them in the low, mid, high. Find those cards that resonate. Or you can say, I've gotten feedback that my emotions are all over the place. I'm going to start with these trigger cards. Or there are some things, I don't know why I keep answering the phone for my ex. I don't know why I keep saying yes to people when I know I mean no, or I know I want to say no. I'm going to choose the habit cards. Or I can't stop this negative self-talk that is happening. I know I'm speaking negatively to myself. I'm going to do the mindset cards. And so knowing where to start requires already a little level of insight. But even if you don't have those, you can start like you said, which is I can go and find the card that resonates with me and I can start that way. We also have a journal to complement the cards that at the beginning gives you an assessment to complete, where it tells you based on the highest score, here's where you should start. For those people who may not have that insight or understanding of where to start and just want to kind of like figure out a good place to start.
Does the journal come with the cards? Because I don't think we have the journal. Does it come with the cards, or we can order it separately? Or
you order it separately, and it's completely complimentary. So you can't have the journal by itself without having the cards, because the journal won't make sense that way. So you have to purchase it in addition to the cards.
And I saw that you also have cards for men, women, and teens, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Why did you decide to separate it that way?
Because we have separate, unique experiences. One of the reasons, as a Black woman, the teen deck came second, right? So the women's deck was initial, and then out of the women's deck, the women asked for, what are you going to do about our teens? What are you going to do about little boys? What are you going to do about little girls? So I said, okay, well, let's create a deck for little girls, because I really do think that is important. I didn't want those same questions going to the teen girls, because I felt like teen girls need space to remain teen girls. A lot of the spaces typically that especially Black teen girls enter, they're adultified. So I didn't want to have a deck where grown women are on this deck saying, let me give this to my 12-year-old, because the representation matters. So I wanted have y'all seen the teen deck?
I haven't, no.
We haven't seen the teen. Okay. Oh, we did.
You haven't seen the teen deck? I wanted the cards to be representative of what a teen looks like. And I didn't want to continue to adultify our girls that way.
Yes, great.
And I wanted the cards to be significant enough to the experience and relevant enough to what they were experiencing now. As a Black woman turning 40 this year, social media has a role in my life, but social media doesn't have a role in my life like it has a role in my 17-year-old niece's life. Does that make sense? So there are some questions in the teen deck that is relevant to their experience that's not in the women's deck, because that may not particularly be relevant to our experience. Especially the teen deck, the women's deck is from like 19 on, and then from the teen deck is like from 12 to 19. So you may even have somebody who's a freshman in college, depending on their emotional maturity, who still needs the teen deck, or depending on where they are, may need the adult deck. And not saying younger adults aren't as impacted by social media, but the kids typically are. And the teens, they have a little bit more insight and are growing into kind of like incitement, gaining some enlightenment about themselves, gaining some understanding, some self-awareness. So those questions may or may not be relevant. And then there are some questions about influencing from peers. What are those things you want to tell your parents that you may not want to share with anybody else, or things that you wish your parents would talk to you about that you haven't been able to talk about? Those things are in the team deck. There are instances when I actually pull cards from the team deck myself. And for the men, our experiences are completely different as well. There are questions in there about how does how you were raised impact how you experience the world now. What did you learn about being a man? And so that is a specific question in the male deck that's not in the women's deck, because I know we're socialized differently, especially when we're talking about mental health and emotional expression. Men are taught, we're called emotional creatures, women are, but men are taught not to be emotional. So I really wanted to gauge, what are those things that you were taught that actually impact how you are experiencing yourself and your emotions now? What do you wish you would tell your younger male self? What do you want your legacy to be? How do you want, children or other people to view you? What are those things that you want to experience, but you feel like you can't experience due to how we're socialized or how males are socialized? So those are the differences in those decks, because the experiences are unique. There are some cards though that are overlaps. So what do you need to forgive yourself for is included in the women's and men deck. That card is not included in the team deck, because I don't want teens to get this idea that they are already wrong or something they should feel guilty about. Don't want that to happen. And I don't want us to be asking teens questions about what they need to forgive themselves for when they don't even really understand the concept of forgiveness, right? But there are questions like, there's the question in there for teens is, what do you wish your future self would know? But they don't have a question about what do you wish your younger self would know.
Okay.
So some stuff just isn't relevant for the age, the mindset, and the age range. But some of the cards in the women's deck, like, what do you keep doing that you know is not helpful? That question is in all of the decks, because we all keep doing things that we know are not helpful.
Yeah. Yes.
And I want to show y'all the team deck too.
Yeah, I would like to see that.
I'd like to see that. We don't have that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go in the other room. My partner is a social worker and took the team deck for work. So it's not right in front of me.
Okay. Oh, that's
No problem. No problem.
But I can bring it up. If it's on the website, it's a yellow card deck with two little girls' faces on it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned the term adultify. Can you explain that to me, please?
Yes. So it's giving adult characteristics, adult sort of personas to children. So when Black girls, so there's a huge study that came out of, I believe it's Georgetown, the adultification of Black girls. So seeing Black girls as older than they are, seeing Black girls as adults and putting the adult qualities on them versus seeing them as teens. So in the study talking about Black girls Black girls are suspended at far higher rates than their white counterparts of the same age, because they're looked at as, they should know better, because they're looked at as adults. And not kids. They're looked at as stronger versus their white counterparts. And so when we talk about suspension rates, in-school suspension, prison, jail sentences, they're given harsher sentences because they're looked at as older than what they are. Therefore, they should have known better than their white counterparts.
Oh, that's amazing. That's an amazing concept. Yeah, I didn't know.
So it's called the adultification. So looking at them, and then there was a Netflix special where this woman tried to bring attention to that. It backfired because Netflix marketed it the wrong way. But she was basically showing how sexualized young Black girls are in a comparison to their white counterparts.
Oh my gosh.
They're looked at as women because of our body parts and the ways we develop, and not little girls.
Do you find that on the women's cards, do you find that those cards are also helpful for, say, older women, seniors?
Yes, I do. Although I will tell you this, Mel, I haven't gotten any feedback from people who have said, from seniors who about the cards. I work with seniors in my practice, and part of the work that we're doing is pushing past resistance, pushing past this idea that change is even going to be beneficial for me at this point. And so this has worked for me for so long. Why do I give it up now? So that is the work that we're doing in session. I haven't gotten any feedback about the cards, in particular with seniors. I don't believe they would be sort of unhelpful. I really do believe they would be beneficial, but I'm not quite sure if seniors are like, yeah, that's cute, but I'm not about to do that. Not quite sure if that's
Well, are there groups, that who should not be using the cards? I mean, or is there a stage at which you should not use the cards?
Yeah, so kids should not be using these cards. They have not been normed for kids yet. We have not come out with the kids deck. So kids, people ask me all the time, "Can I use this with my 6-year-old?" No, because I don't want to be liable for questions that you're asking a 6-year-old that may bring up something, because those cards start at 12. People who are actively psychotic should not use the cards. Or experiencing psychosis. People who are in a manic phase or who are in a deep depression should not use the cards. People who are hallucinating, having delusions should not use the card. People who are actively suicidal should not use the cards. You should not use the cards as a parent with people who've told you that they don't want to use the cards. I have parents all the time who ask me, I want to buy these cards for my kids because I just want them to talk to me. The cards won't make them talk to you. Nothing will. Besides professional help or y'all engaging in some sort of family intervention. The cards are not meant for you to manipulate people with. I've seen people buy them for their partners and like, I'm gonna buy this for my husband because he needs to learn how to talk. People have to be willing to use the cards, just like they have to be willing to engage in therapy in order for it to be, beneficial at the maximum level. So those are the things that I would say. No kids, you can't force anybody to use them, and people who are experiencing active psychosis or suicidal thoughts should not use the cards. You can still use them if you're in an inpatient setting. I will say that. If you are a therapist who's in an inpatient setting running a group and your clients are on they're stabilized, you can use the cards for that population. But if they're actively suicidal, trying to get them, crisis management is what's needed, not insight work.
I see. What about, can the cards be used like as a coping mechanism, like women, just friends, getting together to support each other just in the, things that happen to us on an everyday situation, some being racism, some being, the job just isn't right or whatever. Is that an appropriate use of the cards?
Absolutely. My most favorite thing that I heard when the cards came out was that people were using them for girls' night, because this is the height of the pandemic, right? People were having bonfires with their close friends and they were using the cards. They were having sleepovers with their pods and they were using the cards. And then when the world opened back up, they were going to brunch and using the card. People use them for empowerment circles. People use them for team building exercises. People use them to bond. And so, yes, if we're hanging out and we're having our girls' night, Galentine's is a good opportunity to use the cards. So we're bonding, we're talking, we're venting to each other, and we're doing things, we're asking questions that are meaningful. So I've seen these cards used in those contexts, and I've seen men too use them in their men's circles, like in barbershops and that kind of thing.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's an amazing experience to be, with your close friends and all of that, and to go through some of the cards and what it brings out, and that makes the bonding just that much more, I think, great, and precious,
Yeah.
So that's really a wonderful thing for the cards. But at some point, so you're using the cards by yourself. At some point, do you say, "Wait a minute, this is I can't figure this out. This is bigger than me"? Has that happened?
Yes, it has. And that's when people are like, okay, I need to talk to a therapist, or I need to go back to therapy, because some people have stopped therapy and gone back. It's like, oh, I thought I had gotten through all the things that I need to get through with the cards. I'm going to go back and revisit this and just establish a relationship with the therapist. So yes, it has gotten to the point where people gain insight, and that's what we want. We want people to gain some information. We want people to get some idea of, oh, this is bigger than me now. I need to go get help for this. I've tried to help myself stop answering the phone. I've tried to stop texting. I can't. I've tried to stop saying yes. I keep blurring my boundaries. What do I need to do? And so I need to go get some skills at this point.
So that has happened, and people
yes,
have
that
gone
has happened.
therapy.
That has happened.
So are there resources that you point people to? I mean, is there a way to find therapists who can handle this?
Yes. So if you scan the QR code, if you go to the link, there's a resource page of directories that you can go on. So Therapy for Black Girls is on there. Inclusive therapists are on there. Psychology Today. So I have a list of directories that people can go to find a therapist in their area.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. Have you ever heard or used the term woke therapist?
I heard it. Yeah, I heard it. Yeah.
So I was wondering, are there therapists maybe who deal better with Black people's issues and than others? I mean, how would you find, those are the therapists that you have in your resource?
Those are the therapists I have in my resource, all of them except for Psychology Today. The only reason I put Psychology Today on there is because they allow you to filter by insurance. And I know that some people can only access therapy through their insurance.
Oh, that's right.
So I wanted to put that on there. But Inclusive Therapist is a social justice driven platform where therapists are vetted because of the social justice work that they're doing. Right. So that platform is purely vetted, like handpicked. The Therapy for Black Girls are all Black providers who have experience. I don't know if she vets them for the identity work that they've done, but I know it's a platform for Black women to go get help for the issues that they are having with somebody who looks like them. Then there's Therapy for Black Men. I can't remember if I've updated the resource page with that, but Therapy for Black Men has the same concept. Black providers who are specifically trained, not just saying they're culturally competent, but trained to work with Black men. So yes, so I wouldn't put myself on Therapy for Black Men because Black men is not my entire population. Right. It's a subset of the work that I do, not a lot of the work that I do. So those people who are on there, a lot of the work that they do is centered around Black men, just like Therapy for Black Girls.
Well, I know, a lot of people had experiences, particularly we're back into racism, experiences with people on television, things happening, George Floyd. I mean, there have been many, many examples. If I had an experience like that, and I felt very emotional about it, would the therapy cards be appropriate for me to use for something like that?
Yes, and particularly in the teen deck and in the men's deck, there's a self-care menu. So there's a list of things you can do to help take care of yourself. And so the cards would be helpful in processing what are the emotions that I'm experiencing. So one of the things that I'm very proud of that is included in this deck is what we call an emotion wheel. Growing up, a lot of us are not sort of provided the emotional intelligence that we need to be able to identify, recognize emotions. So I thought it was helpful throughout all the decks, even for adults, to kind of include an emotion wheel. So you would go to the wheels like, I just witnessed this person who looks like me being murdered. What am I feeling? I know I feel rage. I know I feel anger. But what else do I feel? And so you can identify your emotion on this wheel. I feel afraid. I feel guilty because I feel like I can do more. I can advocate more. I feel like I could do something else. We all have this guilty feeling when we're trying to figure out what has happened. I feel sad. So a lot of us kind of can't access those emotions sometimes. And as simple as they may sound, some of us have been so conditioned to experience anger and that's it because it's socially acceptable. And many of us don't know or can't say, I feel sad. So we would identify the emotion first. And then we would go to a card like, when you feel difficult emotions, what do you do to calm yourself down? That's a real card. Right. And so you will pull this card. I feel this emotion, finding it hard to calm myself down. Then there's a self-care menu around what you can do to actually take care of yourself.
Yes.
And all of these things are free. Nothing requires money. Nothing requires any sort of additional resource outside of just the space that you're in. So there's something like clean or organize your space, cook a nice meal for yourself, move your body, stretch, name out loud things that you appreciate about yourself, do a body scan. So these are things that you can do that don't require you to feel additional stress if you don't have the money to go out and eat something or that kind of thing.
Okay. And I know a lot of people, because of the pandemic, a lot of Black people have lost people. Is grief, and going through grief and bereavement, are these cards good for that too?
They could be used for grief. They are not specifically normed to deal with the entire grief process. But there are some cards that could be used, and I would say those would be the trigger cards. The trigger cards and the mindset cards, and I'll pull out some that you could use for grief. So finish this sentence is a trigger card. I feel sadness about X, right? And you're going to journal. The prompt is to journal about where that sadness is coming from. So it gives you a coping skill that you can use. Where do you feel safest expressing your emotions? This is a grief. This could be a grief card. I feel like I can't express my emotions in my house because my kids are there. My kids can't see me cry, right? So the trigger cards would all fit for grief. The mindset cards, those would be the ones where, what do you need to forgive yourself for? Because maybe you're thinking, I didn't do enough. What thoughts have helped you to push past hard times? They're in a better place, or I'm at peace knowing that this is that they had made peace with the world, or they had made peace with this, or that they felt okay, or that things are organized. What beliefs or judgments do you have about yourself right now? I am judging myself to be inadequate. I felt like I let this happen again. This is another parent, or I wasn't there. I moved away. I lived too far. I didn't do enough. I should have called. I didn't answer that text. Those kinds of things. And then some other questions like, what advice would you give to your future self who can see themselves past this grief? What does that look like? What can you talk to yourself about now that your future self might be experiencing to help you kind of get some hope about what the future could look like? So some of these cards, especially the trigger cards, can be useful for grief, but some of the mindset cards can also, especially if we're experiencing judgments, limiting thoughts about our role and responsibility in somebody's passing or the loss that we've experienced.
And would you recommend that for teens as well?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you use the cards and I mean something happens, an event or something like that, it causes you stress or trauma or whatever, you use the cards, does that kind of relieve or reduce the emotion and to make it more manageable so you have fewer or less in the way of physical responses or even emotional responses to it?
Yes, that's the hope. The idea is that we're gaining insight about ourselves that would allow us to take the information that we're using to be able to reduce the emotional experience that we're having. So if I'm feeling extreme grief and my grief is rooted in the fact that I thought I could do something about somebody passing, right? If I'm experiencing sadness at a level 9, the goal of the card is not to get you at sadness at a level 0. The goal is to help you get to a level of sadness that is manageable so that you can carry on throughout your day, or at least kind of help you get to the next day or to your next therapy appointment so you can process what this sadness is. So once I realized, oh my goodness, this sadness is because I'm judging myself as responsible for this. There was nothing I could have done, but I'm still holding on to this sadness. So that insight around, I didn't cause this. Like, this wasn't my fault. I did what I could do. I actually I sent money. I did all these things. So now my sadness may have gone from a 9 to a 7 or 9 to a 6. That allows me, being at a 6, I can feed myself. At a 6, I can take a shower. At a 6, I can sleep a little bit tonight. At a 6, I can at least fold clothes, organize my house. I can do things that I can at a 6 that I might not be able to do at a 9. So I feel a little bit more mobile. That's what we're hoping for, is that the cards generate some reprieve for you if you're experiencing stuckness, so that you can get on to living a quality life or creating a quality life. And then you can use the card to go to therapy. You say, I have these judgments, or I cannot get this thought out of my mind, that if I had called my mom, or if I had moved home a year ago when I had thought my mom would still be here. That's a real thought that I've heard somebody say. And so if that's the judgment that you have, if that's the thought you're holding on to, you will take that thought to session with your therapist. And y'all will begin to uncover, unpack, work around the irrationality of that, or actually peel back why this is your responsibility or what could have happened and that kind of thing. So you're doing more exploration work. And typically therapists will find the question on the card, ask more follow-up questions, which is why it's good to be in a relationship with a therapist and why it never can replace, because those follow-up questions help to unpack some of that stuff some more.
Oh, wow. So it seems to me that the therapy cards are something you should always have with you.
I think so, which is why we made them small. So they were going to be bigger than this, but we wanted them to be small so that you can put it in your pocket, so you can put it in your purse. And we wanted it to be in this tin can so it can be a little bit more durable as you take it to different places. So I drop it in my purse. I don't have to worry about the cardboard coming loose, coming apart when you have like a regular card deck. The more you carry them, the more wear and tear, the more they begin to fall apart. So we wanted the tin deck, we wanted the tin container so that you can carry them with you, drop them in your purse, drop them in your pocket, sit down, bend around, and the cards aren't impacted. So yes, they're meant to be mobile, they're meant to be taken with you.
Yeah, so if something happens, then they're there, and you can immediately address the problem, get that 9, like you said, down to a 6 or 5, so that you can continue your life.
Yeah, but not if it's a crisis. Now, if you're in an accident, we don't want you pulling out your therapy cards to get through the accident, because that's a crisis, right? We need more higher level care. But yeah, like if I'm in a relationship and I just had an argument with somebody and I'm like in my car and I'm like, oh, I know this is something that I need to work on, something I've been working on. You could pull a card and then begin to do some work around that. Yes.
Okay, well, I mean, for instance, for me, for example, and I know ETT viewers know all about me with my anxiety. Now, I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up, I can't sleep. Would this be a good time to reach over for a card? And what would that be? Would that be a trigger card, or I can use any?
Well, it depends on what's keeping you up. It depends on what's keeping you up. What's going on in your mind? Like what are you ruminating about? If you pull that one card a week, then yes. So say you pulled a card and you're like, okay, I'm up. This is my week to work on a mindset card. I'm going to just pull a card. It could be something as simple as when you put yourself first, what does that say about you? And you're like, well, I have time. I'm up. I can't go back to sleep. I'm going to continue to process this card in my journal. I'm going to continue to process this card out loud. What does this mean? Or you can either do some breath work, like, okay, I recognize that I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm going to do some work to ground. So it could be complementary to grounding. It could be complementary to going back to work. It could be the time that you get your journaling done. But if I have this card, and this is the card I pulled on like a Sunday, if I wake up on a Wednesday at 3 o'clock and say, oh, well, I know that I have that card that I need to work through that I haven't journaled about. I'm going to go to that and I'm going to do that.
Okay. Wow, so these are really practical, and I mean, they're flexible. You can use any time. They can be right here next to you. And I love how it's divided into the mindset, habits, and triggers. I mean, and then you have a task on here as well, on each one. And I really think that's great too. So, I mean, do you mind if I read one of the cards?
Go ahead. Okay. I have an appointment in a second, but yes, we have time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so yeah, this is a habit card. What will your life look like if you change the habits that no longer work? Task: identify the things that would be different about you and your life if I changed change the habits that no longer work. Okay. I mean,
just answer that one if you want me to.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
So I created the cards. I wanted them to be a little bit more in depth than affirmation cards. So I wanted a task. One of the things that I know people need is tell me what to do with that now. So now I know I don't have this habit. What do I need to do? So that's what the task is. The task is to give you give you information on how to process the thought that just came up, or the information that you just kind of realized. And it's a way to cope too, because journaling is a coping skill. Talking to somebody is a coping skill. So we wanted to sort of like include that in the creation of the cards. So if you're asking me that question, one of the things that I keep doing, which is ideal, what is happening now, I schedule myself hour on the hour. And I know that has not worked for me for a long time, but I do it and I keep doing it. What my life will look like if I stop doing that is I will have time to transition from one appointment to the next. I would be less flustered. I would be less anxious. And I know that I'd be more productive. But it's so habitual and it's ingrained in me that when I see a white space, I can schedule somebody into that space. So that's my stuff that I keep doing.
Okay.
And I know I need to stop. But I worked on this in therapy and I need to bring it to my therapist on Friday.
Well, I mean, this is so helpful. And Dr. Ebony, you said that you just have another appointment coming up, so we know that you schedule, so we won't interrupt that.
I keep doing it.
This has been so helpful to us, and it's going to be so helpful to the audience too. And yeah, it's really good to hear, Black people helping other Black people with mental health, and he's saying it's okay, to admit that you're struggling and then to seek help.
Yes,
Really.
it is definitely okay. It's more than okay. It is
I've
necessary.
learned a lot, and I'm going to
Yeah.
have my cards with me wherever I go.
Me too.
Thank
Me
you. Tell me
too.
how they work out for you, please.
Yeah,
I sure will.
right.
And I'm going to get the journal too, because I'm a
Okay.
journaling person anyway, and that's this fits so perfectly with these cards. So
Good. Thank you so much. Thank y'all. This is so rich in
Thank
conversation. It
you.
gives me so much more that I need to be explaining on my social media accounts and on the website about the cards. So thank y'all for these questions.
Thank
These are
you.
questions people have that I know I need to be addressing. So I appreciate that.
yeah,
It's,
thank you for
it's
spending the
been
time with us. Yeah, and we will talk to you soon, and we'll tell you
Okay.
all about how
Thank
we
y'all
do the
so
cards
much for the
too.
work you're doing. I
thank
appreciate it.
you for
Bye,
Thank
y'all.
your
you.
work. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Jumbo Espresso Talk Today community. It's Robin here. I'm back. This is actually the end of the show, and sadly, the end of our uncommon conversation with Dr. Ebony Butler. First, I want to say a big asante sana to Dr. Ebony for joining the Espresso Talk Today show for this important discussion about the My Therapy cards and mental health challenges faced by Black men, women, and teens today. As ETT listeners know, Espresso Talk Today has been deeply concerned about Black mental health. So we've been discussing this issue with other brilliant professionals, some in public health or in epidemiology and psychology and general medicine. We've learned that racism is a pervasive and persistent problem that is absolutely affecting the mental health of Black people. And we hope that you also see that anxiety, depression, and other stress related mental illnesses are real. They're not just something to get over, and that your feelings and experiences are real and valid. Yes, they can be traumatic, they can be devastating, they can be life threatening. The good news is that there really is help available, lots of it. You don't have to go through this alone. Therapists experienced in these conditions, like Dr. Ebony Butler, are available and committed to helping people experiencing stress and trauma to live their best and empowered lives. The My Therapy cards are also an excellent resource that you can use on your own, you can use with a trusted friend or a group of friends, and you can even use them with your therapist. You can order them at drebony.com. We also have a link on our resources page at the Espresso Talk Today website at espressotalktoday.com. We hope that you enjoyed this discussion and found it helpful. We would love to hear your comments and questions, so please feel free to contact us at team@espressotalktoday.com. You can find more information and detail on about Dr. Ebony's My Therapy cards at drebony.com as well. Next week, got a surprise here. Next week, we will have a Real Talk podcast show about the My Therapy cards and using the My Therapy cards. The Espresso Talk Today, our Real Talks, are when members of the ETT team get together and discuss what we've just learned from one of the great professionals on the show. Next week, we're going to use the My Therapy cards. We're actually going to use them. These Real Talks are unscripted, as are all of our uncommon conversations, and they're unrehearsed. We hope that you'll join us next week for a Real Talk on My Therapy cards. You are going to see how we use these cards, and what we experience with them. Please send any of your questions or comments to us. We'd love to hear from you. Asante Sana for coming through today, community. And remember, soul, strength, and reparations. Bye for now. Ashe.